Okay, so I think people are starting to filter in at this point. I'm just going to give a few more, just 1 minute, just to let our attendees come in, and people can continue to join as we go. Okay, we've allowed about an hour for this for the webinar, so we hope to have a good discussion. So I'll get started straight away, and I know people will continue to come in, and that's all well and good. So the first thing is just to say good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to our webinar. It's delivered in collaboration. Unusually this time, it's delivered in collaboration with the Irish members of FIANSA, which is the European Federation of Homeless Service Providers based in Brussels. And Simon Communities are obviously an active member. I'm currently on the, on behalf of Simon, I'm currently on the executive committee and vice president myself. But the other members are DePaul Ireland, Focus Ireland, Genio, the Irish Council for Social Housing, Novus, Peter McVerry Trust, Respond, and the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. So we have a wide range of NGOs working in the area of homelessness who participate in FIANSA. And I think today we sort of, it's been the culmination of a lot of work, but it's been the ongoing ambition of FIANSA for a long time that we would get towards a European strategy on homelessness. And there's been a number of kind of different action taken over the years to try and get us there. But and I know Freck in his presentation is going to talk through these. But probably one of them most recent benchmarks of it has been during the Irish presidency, Jan O'Sullivan, who's a former Minister for Housing, and when she held that role, Ireland held the presidency of the European Council. And as Minister, she organised a meeting of ministers in Leuven to talk about the homelessness in Europe and how Europe might coordinate better to develop that. And that's very much been one of the benchmark moments along this trajectory, and shows how Ireland has, in the social field in particular, has always played a significant role, and we hope to see that continued. So our speakers today are, who's going to speak first is Freck Spinwin, who's the director of FIANSA. He's worked with FIANSA for more years than he'd want me to tell you. And has obviously been instrumental in kind of working with the European Commission, working with member states, and working with us as the NGO sector to try and bring everybody together to advance the cause of homelessness particularly in the European sphere. We're also joined by, as I mentioned, Jan O'Sullivan, who's former Minister for Housing, who, as I say, organised that very pivotal meeting of ministers in Leuven in 2013. And we're also joined today by Barry Andrews, who's currently an MEP, former Minister for Children, and also former Director of the Institute of International and European Affairs. And I know from conversations that Barry has been very conscious of the potential for the European institutions to play a role in helping us to address, certainly in the Irish context, the housing and homelessness crisis that is still with us. So that's enough from me. So I'm going to hand over now first to Freck, who's going to talk us through the potential for a European strategy on homelessness and the current momentum that's behind that in Europe.
Thank you, Wayne. Do you hear me all? Yes. I'll try to share my screen. Not should work well, I hope. Okay. So good afternoon and greetings from Belgium. As Ireland, we're in lockdown, but we're trying to make the best out of it. Wayne asked me to speak to you about recent developments at EU level on the issue of homelessness and explain how we're making progress towards an EU homeless strategy. First of all, I would like to give you a little bit of history, because the current political momentum at EU level on the issue of homelessness has not happened in the last couple of months. It goes back quite some time. And maybe it's good to mention three pivotal moments that happened in the last 10 years. First, there was during the Belgian EU presidency in 2010, a European consensus conference on homelessness. The idea of the consensus conference was to create a sort of a consensual basis which the European Union, the European Commission could use to develop EU actions on homelessness, because we realized it was not long after the enlargement of the European Union that there was a lack of consensus, which could be a reason for the European Commission not to embrace the issue of homelessness. So we thought organizing a consensus conference to build this consensus was a good idea. One of the questions that was answered by the European Consensus Conference was, is there a role for the European Union in relation to homelessness? And the conclusion of the jury of the Consensus Conference was, yes, there is a role for the European Union, and that role should be developed in an EU strategy on homelessness. So that's the first time the word strategy, homeless strategy, was sort of formally used at EU level. Then, like Wayne said already before, there was the Irish presidency in 2013, where we managed, or not we, but the Irish government at the time managed to get EU ministries around the table on the issue of homelessness. If I remember well, we had 22 or 23 countries represented in Leuven, my hometown. And also there was some kind of outcome of the ministers' meetings and some kind of a declaration which referred to the need to have defined action by the European Commission to support member states in their efforts to address homelessness. So what was interesting here is that that was backed by all the ministries present there, and so more important politically, more important than the outcome of the European Consensus Conference in 2010. And then following that ministers' roundtable in Leuven, there was a resolution of the European Parliament in 2014, backed by an overwhelming majority of the European Parliament back then, also calling for the the European Commission, to develop an EU strategy on homelessness. So that's a little bit the history to the current developments. Now, why did the strategy not get developed immediately after these events, and especially after the ministers' roundtable during the Irish presidency? Well, the first reason is because the European Commission at the time was not impressed. Laszlo Andor, who was the Commissioner for Social Affairs during that period when the Irish roundtable happened, it was at the end of his mandate. The roundtable was in 2013, and he finished his mandate in 2014. And probably the political momentum coming from the Irish roundtable came too late for him to take up the issue of homelessness. And the commissioner that followed him, Marianne Thyssen, had really no interest in the issue of homelessness. It's very difficult to get the European Commission to do anything if the commission responsible is not convinced it's the issue to take on. But we didn't leave it there. Fianza with partners slowly further built the political pressure. The European Parliament was a really strong ally, integrating calls for more action, more EU action on homelessness in all the reports, or many of the reports that they produced in the social policy area. Also, the Economic and Social Committee, which represents the social partners at EU level, issued a few calls on homelessness. The Committee of of the regions, which brings cities and regions together, did the same. And even bodies outside of the European Union started working on homelessness, like the OECD and the UN. And that helped to sort of make the European Commission realize it was necessary to do something. And a very important moment was when the Parliament, the Commission, and the Council solemnly endorsed, they say, the EU Pillar of Social Rights, which is a set of rights, 20 rights, that the European Union wants to use for future social policy. So this EU Pillar for Social Rights, which was supported by the three institutions in 2017, has become the framework for EU social policy now and in the future years. And one of the principles or rights in that pillar relates to homelessness. And that has really been the hook for the European Commission to become more ambitious in relation to homelessness. And then something we shouldn't forget is that between 2010 and 2020, we saw a massive increase in homelessness in most countries of the European Union. And that, of course, also made it a more important issue also at EU level. Now, I'm going to say a few words about what the European Commission calls their EU collaboration platform on homelessness. So that's the sort of EU strategy that they are currently working on together with us and a few other stakeholders. The origin of that was that end of last year, second half of last year, 2019, the Finnish EU presidency managed to integrate into the conclusions of one of the EPSCO councils a reference to homelessness. And that's important because that's a formal mandate for the European Commission to work on homelessness. So in the EPSCO Council, it said that the Council called on the European Commission to continue design and implement measures acknowledging and addressing homelessness and promote access to affordable housing for all. It sounds probably quite bland and general, but for the European Commission and in the European EU bureaucracy, it's important to have this kind of formal mandate. The EPSCO Council is the Council of Ministers of Social Affairs, and it's a formal council constellation. So that was important. And then Commissioner Schmidt, the current Commissioner for Social Affairs, when he came in power end of last year or beginning of this year, he showed a real personal commitment to the cause. And that's, of course, very helpful. When I heard that the Commissioner for Social Affairs would be somebody from Luxembourg, I was very pessimistic, but because if there is one country where homelessness is not a very visible issue and really quite a non-issue at political level, it's Luxembourg. But I was wrong. Nicolas Schmid has really a personal commitment to do something about it, and he has made it a priority in his mandate. And to show that for him homelessness is a serious issue, he wrote an opinion article, an op-ed, in the European press in May 2020, where he announced that he would launch next year, in the first half of next year, this EU collaboration platform. So when I speak about this EU collaboration platform, the only formal reference you can find is in the op-ed. Maybe good to know also that he wrote the op-ed together with the Minister of Social Affairs of Portugal, which holds the next presidency in the first half of 2021. And so that brings me to the last point here, that there is strong interest of the Portuguese EU presidency. They have made homelessness a social policy priority, and they're really keen to make progress during the 6 months they hold the presidency. Now, what will happen on this collaboration platform? First of all, there will be an informal discussion, a lunch discussion on homelessness in the EPSCO Council. So that's the Council of Ministers of Social Affairs and Employment of all EU member states in February 2021. And again, that might sound a little bit vague and superficial, but it would be the first time ever that at the level of the EPSCO Council, there is a discussion on homelessness. I realized that the people, the ministers around the table at the EPSCO Council are not necessarily the minister responsible for homelessness, but that's how the EU policy framework is organized. It is really important that the EPSCO Council has an hour or an hour and a half discussion on homelessness. Then there will be the launch of the action plan on the EU Pillar of Social Rights, where you had this principle 19 on homelessness. And as part of that action plan, there will be the announcement of the EU collaboration platform. So the EU collaboration platform on homelessness will be part of that action plan. That will happen in May. And then in June, the second half of June, there will be the actual launch of the EU collaboration platform on homelessness. And that will consist of two things. First of all, a ministers meeting. So this will be the first time that the Irish roundtable of ministers was more high-level civil servants with a few countries bringing ministers. Here, the idea is to bring from as many countries as possible the actual ministers responsible for homelessness together. And they would adopt a political declaration on homelessness, which will form the political basis for this EU collaboration platform. And then there will be a launch conference of the platform itself. We're currently working together with the Portuguese presidency and the European Commission on the political declaration and the program for the launch event. Now, very quickly, what is the collaboration platform? It has to be defined still, but what Commissioner Smith said, I want to help member states in their efforts to address homelessness. And the member states have to let me know how they want the European Commission to be active, supportive for them. And then there is, of course, plenty of opportunities. One of the opportunities where the European Commission can be involved in is everything to do with mutual learning, transnational learning. That can be research questions that are questions in a number of member states. They could be pooled at European level, and EU money could be used to turn it into a transnational research. That can be the exchange of experiences on topical issues related to homelessness. Health, for instance, might be an important topic now, or housing first, etc. Or organizing trainings around new interventions to homelessness, such as housing first. These could be all classified under learning. Another area where the European Commission could be helpful is in monitoring policy progress and monitoring trends with relation to homelessness. They have already promised that they will produce a toolkit on homeless strategies for the member states. Might be more important for those countries that don't have national strategies and for those countries that have them or have had them in the past, like Ireland. They will try to monitor progress on homelessness in the EU semester process, which is an socio-economic process which the European Commission uses to steer policy of member states in a certain direction. And data collection is also one of the possible initiatives. Good to know that there is no data collected by the European Union, by Eurostat, the Statistical Office on Homelessness. Third issue is funding. The European Commission could more proactively get involved to make sure that EU funding is available for homelessness and encourage member states to use these opportunities. I'm not going into any detail, we can come back to that later on, but there is the European Social Fund, there is the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is the Corona support money. It's almost 700 billion euros, so it's potentially a lot of money. Not all grants, it's grants and loans, but still quite important. Some countries have already said, like Portugal and Spain, that they will use some of that money to bring housing first to scale. So that can be an interesting example. And also the Invest EU program, which is run by the EIB, which is about loans. So making the link between homelessness and funding, EU funding would be another area of activity, potential area of activity. The fourth area is mainstreaming. Like the European Commission can be asked to integrate homelessness in all their other relevant policy initiatives. There is a gender equality strategy, there is a disability strategy, there is some policy action related to child poverty. There is the youth guarantee, there is the Roma platform, there's LGBTQI strategy, etc., etc. All these strategies have a potential link with homelessness, and so we could ask the European Commission to actually integrate homelessness in there, and then that will come with a number of activities. And then the last area is potentially legislation. People always say that the European Union has no responsibility when it comes to homelessness, but it depends how you look at it. For instance, in a number of countries, free movement is linked to homelessness. In some countries, especially when it concerns rough sleepers, part of the rough sleeper population, sometimes a substantial part, are EU mobile citizens. So citizens from another EU country that are homeless in the host EU country. That is EU competence and can actually be addressed through legislation. Another area is EU citizenship, everything that concerns elections, for instance. At the moment, the EU law foresees that people can only vote when they have an address. Well, that law can change to allow or to facilitate homeless people to take part in European elections. These are just a few examples. Now, how will this collaboration platform function? What will be the governance underpinning it? First of all, the Commission has committed to organize a biannual ministerial meeting on homelessness. I hope biannual means once every 2 years. That's what I mean. That's important because that keeps the political momentum high. There will very probably be regular meetings of civil servants responsible for homelessness to help steer the European Commission in further building this collaboration platform. And that needs to be defined still. I guess that FEANZA will have a role in coordination, in close cooperation with DG Employment of the European Commission, the responsible DG there, as FEANZA is the only European network that works exclusively on the issue of homelessness. The big question is how many resources, EU resources, will be made available, but we're hopeful that it will be substantial resources. I'm almost at the end now. Important to remind everybody that the collaboration platform on homelessness is a bottom-up initiative. When Commissioner Schmid launched it, he says it's a voluntary process. I'm not going to oblige member states to be involved in it, and the European Commission will not necessarily take the lead. The Commission is ready to help the member states with their efforts to fight homelessness. And the collaboration platform is a tool to do that, but it's up to member states to sign up to the collaboration platform. What is interesting is that it creates some kind of a power shift, because if the Commission says, I'm willing to help you, and member states say, well, this is the way we want you to help us, that puts the member states in the power to decide what the European Commission should actually do. Of course, within the framework in which the Commission operates and the limited financial resources, but still, it's important. What we need to do in the next few months is to make sure that there is buy-in from a sufficient number of member states. The European Commission has said that they will only be involved, they said that informally, that they will only take a proactive role as coordinator of the collaboration platform if at least 50% of the EU member states sign up to it. And that's why it is important that member states, including Ireland, already confirm their interest in the EU collaboration platform. Like I said, Commissioner Schmid announced it in an op-ed, so it is out there, it's in the public domain. But to contact Commissioner Schmid to say, well, it's an interesting initiative, we would like to be involved. And it would be very important to collect a handful of countries that are really keen to co-steer this collaboration platform together with the European Commission. And since Ireland played a role in 2013, maybe Ireland is still interested in being one of these leading countries that can help to make sure the collaboration platform goes into the right direction. In terms of concrete activities, like I listed the possibilities, for the moment, the European Commission is a bit hesitant. I think we'll first have to make sure that we have the buy-in of the member states, and then the European Commission will feel the pressure to actually concretize what the collaboration platform could look like. That's what I wanted to convey to you in the short time that I have available, but I'm very willing to answer all the questions or criticism that you might have.
Thanks very much for that, Freck. It's the thing. I see a couple of people in the chat already. I'm going to carry on with our speakers, but if you have questions occur to you as we go, do put them into the chat, and I'll ask them towards the end when we have all our panel back. So our next speaker is Jana Sullivan, who's going to respond to Freck's presentation, but also obviously with her own experience as well. So over to you, Jan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wayne. And I'm just very much welcome this opportunity. And it was really interesting to listen to Freck and to hear the plans for the future. And I suppose I do very much believe that it is time for more action from the European Union. My meeting back in 2013, when Ireland held the presidency, was very much designed to kickstart a discussion around collaboration, around developing a European strategy on the issue of homelessness. And as has been said, we held it in Leuven. It was attended by more than 20 countries. And we did put forward proposals, there was discussion, and there was an agreed outcome of that meeting. And we very much hoped that that would continue into the future. Now, I suppose we're in 2020 and there has been some progress along the way, but I think certainly from what Freck has just outlined, I think there is a real opportunity now for progress to be significantly increased in the next year. And I very much welcome that, and I very much welcome the work that has been done by the European Parliament since then, that has been done more recently by presidencies, both the Finnish and the Portuguese. And indeed, certainly there seems to be much more of a focus now from the Commission and from the current Commissioner. And I suppose one of the, I think, contexts that I very much wanted to speak in is one that already referred to by Freck, which is around Principle 19 of the European Pillar of Social Rights, which specifically focuses on homelessness. And I think that is very much the framework in which we're having this discussion. Now, when we held the meeting back in 2013, we did agree that there were a number of areas that the work needed to continue on. First of all, that there needed to be agreement on a set of principles. Secondly, that governments needed to gather their data, to monitor their actions and to report on those actions, and that there would be a reporting mechanism. And then that we would share experience within the European Union and hopefully then come to the point that I suppose in a lot of ways we're only coming to now, where we would see very much concerted action. And I think the collaboration platform that Freck outlined is a real context in which that can now happen. And I very much welcome that. The context at the time that we were at was Europe 2020. And there was a commitment at that time to work to lift 20 million people out of poverty and social exclusion. And obviously homelessness is a most extreme, I suppose, form of poverty and social exclusion. And we worked very much in that context, but clearly now we are in the context of a new budgetary period from 2021 to 2027, but also I think very much a willingness on the part of the European Union to move this forward. One of the issues always, I think, has been that competencies vary across different ministries in relation to housing and homelessness. And also in some cases, it's regional or local governments that have the primary responsibility. So I suppose it was never going to be easy to coordinate it under, for example, one council of ministers, because it crossed over a number of different ministries. So that has been an issue that has always been there, I suppose. The other thing I think that's important in terms of what's happening now is, and it's something we were conscious of in having the meeting at the time, is that you have different political cycles in all of our countries, all of our democracies. And we wanted to start something that would continue through different governments, different political cycles across the European Union. So I think this is a real opportunity now to make sure that that happens. So one of the things is to learn from others. And I know that Freck spoke about, for example, Housing First. And I think we've looked to Finland, we've looked to Scandinavian countries in particular on their expertise there. Areas like, for example, Vienna in terms of cost rental, I think, is an example again of how states can directly provide housing that's affordable and where the cost is controlled. Because again, something that interests me greatly and worries me is the commodification of housing. And I've been following the work of Lenali Farah, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing, and the work that she's done on, I suppose, the people investing in housing as a form of investment rather than housing as a home. And I very much see, I suppose I fit myself into the category of saying that housing should not be seen as a commodity. We all need a home, and it's a basic need for people. So I think that's the context as well. I'm not quite sure whether the European Union can take action in that regard, but I think by states and by the Union agreeing principles and examples of where we can learn from each other, then if the states all of our states are ensuring that we have control of the cost of housing, that in some way we monitor what the market does, then, you know, I think that's an important role as well. And I think that should be part of the discussion. Also then, the other issues that Wayne raised around access to funding, I think is also important. And I particularly welcome the fact that the EXCO Council will now be directly involved as well, because again, I think it always needed to be fitted somewhere into a Council of Ministers. But the funding, clearly, I think, again, I attended another meeting in 2013 as Housing Minister, a European meeting of ministers. And I think it's still the case that access to the funding that is available through the European Union, through the various instruments, is not always very clearly understood by our individual countries, and therefore not always accessed, you know, in as free a way as it should be. And I think I would very much like to see more clarity around how individual countries and individual ministries and local governments can actually, you know, access the kind of funding that Freck was talking about, including the ESF and this new fund, which I wouldn't be particularly familiar with in the context of COVID-19. Of course, another reason why Europe needs to involve itself very much in all of this is the whole issue of migration. People moving within the European Union, but also people moving from outside of the European Union into Europe. And I suppose if you are moving to another country, then I think you probably are more at risk of having insecure accommodation and an insecure home. And I do think that it is important that again that factor is part of the debate, because as a union, we want to ensure that all European citizens, and indeed anybody who comes to live in Europe, is not in some way disadvantaged in relation to homelessness. And clearly, if you are to participate fully in your society, then having a secure home is one of the most basic needs. And there is a lot of debate, and I think very welcome debate around whether there should be a right to shelter, a right to a home, and various countries have interpreted that in different ways. But again, I suppose what we're focused on here today is what the European Union can do and what we can all do as member states of the European Union. And I would certainly hope in the last point that Freck was making around the collaboration platform and the need for countries to lead. I would very much hope that Ireland will be one of the leading countries in the collaboration. And indeed, I also welcome the fact that in June there will be, I suppose, again, another step forward. And I would certainly hope that Ireland will be directly involved in that. I hope that our meeting back in 2013, you know, was the kickstart that was necessary. There have been, as I said, a number of steps along the way, and I know that the European Parliament has played a positive role. And certainly the fact that the Commission now is becoming much more directly involved in the issue is very welcome. And I will be, obviously I'm not a minister anymore, I'm not involved directly in the process, but as a citizen of the European Union and as a former minister, I very much hope that this most crucial of issues, which is the issue of homelessness, that we will see collaboration that really makes a difference. I think in Europe we pride ourselves, and rightly so, on the fact that we're a social community as well as an economic community, that we want to ensure that all of our citizens within all of our countries have the opportunities to participate in their society and to have the basic needs. And surely housing is the most basic need. So I look forward to watching the progress. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate.
Thanks very much for that, Jan. That was really, you covered a huge amount there. I think one of the first point you made, I think, is one of the really critical ones for those of us who are a bit nervous about what's the potential for this. The fact that you had so much collaboration and such enthusiasm around, you got 23 kind of member states around the table to talk about this issue, I think is really heartening and speaks to the potential that is there to maybe achieve something. So next, I'm going to hand over to Barry Andrews, who's obviously currently as a serving MEP and someone who has a commitment to this issue. Will speak to both that context and the Irish context.
Thanks very much, Wayne, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm very pleased to be involved in this conversation. As Frick mentioned in his contribution, it is not normally a European competence, and many MEPs will concentrate their efforts elsewhere. However, during the election campaign last year, it was such a topical issue, it was such a hot issue, and I felt it was worth exploring if there were ways in which the housing agenda more generally and the homelessness agenda could be addressed at a European level, if there was a way we could Europeanize this critical social policy issue in Ireland. So I'm glad to say I think I have come across some ideas, and this seminar, by the way, I mean, it's very interesting to hear Frick's ideas. And first of all, can I say that the idea that the Irish government would be one of the those that would commit to the collaboration is one that I think will be very well received in the Department of Housing. Obviously, the minister now is a member of my party, Darragh O'Brien, and I've had some good discussions with him, and I have reason to discuss further with him, particularly on the affordable housing, the affordable ownership and affordable rental schemes that he has in preparation over the next couple of weeks. And I can undertake today to press him to make sure that Ireland commits to that collaboration with one of the member states. An early adopter, perhaps we could say. And it's a follow-on, I think, a legacy for Jan O'Sullivan. If I can say, as a former minister myself, it's great to see acknowledgement of the work that was done by a former minister that is beginning to bear fruit. And it's good to see Jan committing to this discussion today. As has already been mentioned, the pandemic puts this issue on top of the agenda, and it has underlined the lack of investment across EU member states. It's the figures, I think we're all very familiar with, the increase in homelessness. Now, there have been reductions in Ireland over 2020, but they're fairly small, and I don't think they're structural changes. I think there's certainly no reason for complacency, and I'm not hearing that. But it is very encouraging to hear the new commissioner from Luxembourg that was mentioned earlier make such a very, very strong personal commitment to this issue. And the change in tone is very noticeable. And the amount of activity in this area, from reports that have been commissioned by different committees of the European Parliament to these types of webinars, discussions on the margins of the EU institutions, it's clearly a sign that there is a new energy in this area, and it's something that can be looked forward to. And the ground for it is, as has been mentioned, Principle 19 of the European Pillar of Social Rights. And I do recall back in 2017, when the Social Summit happened in Gothenburg, that there was a skepticism and perhaps even a cynicism about the capacity of the EU to truly push a social agenda. But there was at that time a very strong enthusiasm, not just in the Commission, but also on the Council. With the election of Macron, I think he wanted what he called l'Europe qui protège, a much stronger social agenda for the European Union. And again, I think that's something that is bearing fruit. So with that in mind, I began to do a little bit of research into this area, and the EMPL committee, the Employment Committee, Social Affairs Committee on the European Parliament. I'm not a member of it, but there is some very good research work being done, and I read some reports that emerged from that. And by the way, one of the reports I read highlighted as best practice the cost rental model that has been operated in Ireland, and which should come on stream in 2021, which I visited very recently in Sandyford in County Dublin. as a good example of what other European countries can pick up. So as has been mentioned earlier, EU-wide housing problem in general is normally identified as outside the EU's competence. But as I've mentioned, I've taken some time to try to, I've written to the minister and met with him personally to try to press on him a couple of ideas which I've had. And I'm delighted to hear already today that some of those ideas are well underway and which I wasn't even aware of. So firstly, I've suggested to the minister that the EU could relax some of the constraints it imposed on member states around investment in social housing. The provision of social housing is exempt from EU state aid rules under the Services of General Economic Interest package. However, this exemption is stringently limited to housing for disadvantaged citizens or socially less advantaged groups. And those definitions are very contested. And in 2007, for example, the Dutch government was successfully challenged by private developers for using too liberal a definition here. So obviously there is an opportunity now to look at the exemptions that are applied to state aid restrictions on investment in social housing and affordable housing, and the impacts that could have on homelessness are very real. I believe that the minister has taken this matter up. I believe that he will take it up with the European Commission, and I think it may have a very significant impact, particularly when we come to talk about the various instruments that are now in circulation around, for example, InvestEU and the recovery package post-COVID. The second point I made to the minister was that the EU can play a significant role in harmonizing definitions and metrics. As you know, I'm sure that there is no common definition of homelessness across the European Union, and this results in data being compared in a difficult way and not an appropriate way. Now, I'm delighted to hear that there will be a meeting of housing ministers in June 2021. It's something that I proposed that Dara O'Brien would initiate himself, but it's clearly that this is already slightly further down the road, and I'm delighted that this is happening. I think it's a great opportunity for sharing best practice, for looking at questions like metrics and definitions, and terms such as adequate shelter and decent housing. They're not commonly defined across the European Union, and therefore comparisons are very difficult to be made clear across all member states. The next issue that I brought up with him was that the Commission and member states should use existing instruments such as the InvestEU, which is worth 650 billion euro, the Joint Transition Fund, and Next Generation EU to increase investment in affordable and energy efficient social housing. I'm conscious of my time. There's a couple of quick points I want to make, Wayne, if I may. The country-specific recommendations are already, they're a very important part of the Stability and Growth Pact, and it's the way in which the Commission helps to shape the budgetary direction of each member state. And housing is coming into this area. And I've noticed it's another area of soft law in which the European Union and the Commission can play a role in the area of affordable housing and homelessness. And it's great to see that is already part of the country-specific recommendations for Ireland, and I think that will deepen and continue. And I suppose the last point I'll make, I agree with Jan about the financialization of housing, the commoditization of housing. I think that's something that I'd like to see tackled as well. But finally, I am calling on the 4 local authorities in Dublin to set up a representative office for Dublin in Brussels, because I think post-COVID, with all the new funding that's available on the social side, post-Brexit, with the lack of UK alignment on some of our priorities, that Dublin needs much stronger representation. There are already 300 regions and cities and municipalities represented in Brussels with representative offices. And I think Dublin should do that. I've met with all the 4 local chief executives of the local authorities, and I've asked them to collaborate on this, and they are beginning to make moves in it. And I think it would be very important in the context of what's happening in this area that the 4 local authorities would work together to achieve their aims and be able to analyze EU legislation and regulations as it's been prepared for homelessness and for affordable housing. So I'll leave it there, and thanks very much for the opportunity. Look forward to the questions.
Thanks very much for that, Barry. I think that's again, you've packed an awful lot into a couple of minutes, and I think what is interesting is how much of having spent time to look at the institutions and the world that you're in now and the parliament that you're in, and take a look at what could be achieved, that so much of it aligns with the ideas that are happening around the platform. I think there's more detail again, which I think actually will be quite valuable for us. And I think the idea of Dublin having a base in Brussels as well, I think is a very interesting one. But I think it also speaks to the potential that's in the platform, that the people are already who've considered what the EU might do and how we might implement it. It could be reflected in that a place to come together and work on this. So I'm going to do now is invite Jan to come back as well, and people want to post questions in the chat. I will read them out, or think. I know I see Freck has been busy responding to people, which saves me a little bit of work. But I think the tenure of the questions is in the first instance. We have a question here from Joe Finnerty, who asked, to what extent will the wider context of housing precarity be addressed at EU level? So I suppose that for me is a question around homelessness. We tend to think of homelessness as rough sleeping or as people in shelters, and how do we move them on? But there's also the aspect of prevention. And I think, Freck, you touched on that particularly when you talked about free movement as one of the areas that we've worked on for a long time, is that there should be work done there around prevention. And obviously prevention is a big part of all of our strategies. So maybe, I don't know, if Freck, if you want to take that.
Yes, well, the EU collaboration platform is likely to have prevention as one of the topics, but it will be really focused on homelessness. And I think it's also important for us to keep the focus on homelessness, because there is a tendency at EU level to broaden issues to concepts that are so broad that they don't have any meaning anymore, and when exchanges and research become actually so superficial that they don't have the impact that you're looking for. So I'm not arguing against EU work on housing, but you have to be careful not to lose the focus on homelessness. It has been 20 years of hard work to actually make the issue of homelessness mount slowly on the EU agenda. It's there. I think we should do the wrong thing if we now say, well, let's talk about housing in general rather than about homelessness. The links are obvious, but we have to be careful strategically with that. That said, there is a whole range of other initiatives at EU level that are touching on the wider issue of housing and housing precarity, as you call it. Barry already mentioned the whole issue of state aid. There is a revision of the state aid legislation ongoing at the moment that might impact on the role of social housing. The European Commission launched 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago the renovation wave. It's a big initiative with a huge budget behind it to renovate housing. Addressing energy poverty, for instance, is one of the aspects of it. That's addressing the broader issue of housing precarity. So there is a whole range of issues, a whole range of initiatives at EU level that relate to that. But the collaboration platform on homelessness will be first and foremost about homelessness, but will, without any doubt, address housing first, for instance, as a topic. So the link is there, but it's not about housing, it's about homelessness, housing in as much as it relates to homelessness.
I did not mute, so I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on any of those points.
Well, maybe could I just say something briefly, Wayne?
Yes, please.
I think the experience in Ireland, certainly on the point of prevention, I do understand what Freck is saying, that, you know, the focus has to be on homelessness, but a lot of the homelessness, the more recent homelessness in Ireland, has been, you know, directly as a result of rents being too high in the private sector. And so in terms of prevention, I think, I mean, you yourselves and practitioners in Ireland would know that a lot of the work, the preventative work, is around ensuring that people can actually stay in accommodation without it becoming unaffordable for them. I realise the point that Freck is making, but I do think the context still is very much that that these things are linked.
Maybe to add to that, Wayne. Oh, sorry. No, excuse me.
Yeah. But,
okay. I was going to say, that's kind of what I was going to say. I mean, there's a real lack. I mean, there's a lot of single homeless in Dublin, and the evidence is that a lot of it is linked to a real lack of, a permanent affordable accommodation. And it's, I hear what you're saying, but I would be, is it just, I almost ask you a question because I wasn't aware of the meeting in June 2021. Is it specifically on homelessness? Is that the plan for it? Yeah. So I'd be interested to hear your views on that.
Yes. I think sometimes in Ireland, like I follow only from a distance what's happening in Ireland, but the way homelessness is a political issue and a public issue is quite exceptional in the European Union context. Like if I open the Irish news every day, there is something on homelessness. There is countries in Europe where homelessness is an absolute non-issue politically, and it's a hard fight to actually mobilize some political attention to this. And I'm not arguing at all that we shouldn't look at housing costs and evictions, for instance, as a cause of homelessness. That's why I said prevention will certainly be part of the EU collaboration platform. But the entry point is homelessness and how do you prevent it, and not how do we create stable and functioning housing markets. I'm not saying that that's not important, but that's not the objective of the collaboration platform.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful intervention, Freck, because I do think prevention would be critical, but we have to view it as preventing homelessness. And if we move to the housing system things, I think we can lose some of our focus, particularly on that issue. I think that's really welcome. Barry, I have a question here from you from my colleague Mike Allen from Focus Ireland, who notes that the current government strategy on homelessness and housing comes to an end at the end of 2020. So that was the plan from the previous government, which was Rebuilding Ireland. Just have you had any discussions with the minister about how a successor, so the new strategy, could draw on EU thinking?
No, I haven't, Wayne. I haven't had direct discussions with the minister on the replacement strategy. I came into this area because of the, because it came into the EMPL committee directly. But what I have, as I mentioned earlier on, to work with the minister over the next couple of weeks on the housing systems issues that are clearly don't want to dwell too long on that, but I certainly will be able to talk to Mike directly on that, and I've spoken to him before on these issues, but I haven't directly discussed that with him at this point.
The question Q&A box. The other question in relation to it, I know, Freck, you answered it in the box, but maybe just if there's any expansion. Somebody mentioned I suppose the collaboration or the link with the social development goals of the UN. You've outlined in the box some of them, but how important are those? I suppose, while the platform is a really welcome initiative, you outlined how it was built in a number of ways by bringing in these other actors. And how do we make sure that we keep that cross agency and cross-party sort of consensus moving forward? Do you feel that's a role for the platform? Can develop that, or is there actually a danger that it might become too condensed?
I might sound too protective of the collaboration platform that is not even launched, but the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN is some kind of a loose framework that the European Commission uses to sort of guide its policies beyond social policies within the time perspective up till 2030. But the previous Commission had the ambition to develop an EU strategy to support member states to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And that has not worked. The Commission did an attempt, but it never materialized into something. So I guess that the reality is that the SDGs are there for the EU somewhere as a framework, but there is no concrete activities linked to it. And I guess that in the social policy area, it is because the social rights pillar, which is now the framework for EU social policy, have made the SDGs to some extent superfluous, you could say. But that's not true in all the areas. I know, for instance, in the area of health, the EU, the Commissioner, for instance, for Health, Kyriakidis, is much more closely linking her policy with the SDGs. So it depends a little bit. So I don't think it will strengthen the collaboration platform on homelessness hugely if we try to make a too strong link with the SDGs in the way they're addressed at EU level.
I might just jump in on that, Wayne. You're absolutely right, Frank. The SDGs are, according to the current Commission President, von der Leyen, they're everybody's responsibility, the entire College of Commissioners. And the criticism then is, well, if it's everybody's responsibility, nobody's responsible. And it does tend to fall between stools across the different Commission directorates. And that is a problem. And I think you're dead right that, you know, the collaboration platform itself on its own has to stand on its own 2 feet. But I'm a member of the MEPs for SDGs group, and we're constantly trying to push that agenda. But it is falling very far behind. I know it's not the subject of today's webinar, but there's a funding gap of trillions of euro between now and 2030 to achieve the 17 goals. So private finance is supposed to bridge that. I mean, it does need to be resurfaced, all of the assumptions behind the SDGs. So I wouldn't be hitching my wagon to the SDGs in this area.
Actually, that leads to a sort of a broader question that I might put to you, Barry, around, and then to Frank and Jan. So based on what Jan was saying, we feel that there's hopefully, if we can maintain the momentum, there's a number of the member states who hopefully will sign up to this and will become a part. The European Parliament has been a really important partner throughout that the process, and in the intervening years. I know we've done I was involved in some lobbying myself around making sure, sort of working with the Parliament to get resolutions and these kind of things passed. I'm just wondering, in your sort of investigations of what can be done, what's your feeling around the momentum or the sense of unity around the issue of homelessness in the European Parliament? Not that you can speak for 750. No, far from it. Look, and I'm not on the ample committee. Just I think just make one point about this, and we could talk about it for a long time. But the complexion of the European Parliament has changed in that there's now a new group in the middle called Renew Europe that we're in, and we tend to hold the balance of power on contentious issues. We have Social Democrats and the Greens on one side, and we have EPP and ECR on the other side. So when we sit down to negotiate the text of an opinion or a report, we are the ones that end up being the pen holders in a way and holding the balance of power. So if you're asking what levers you want to pull, I think the EMPL committee primarily, but also the Renew Europe group would be important to potentially launch this idea before the Renew group, that is the collaboration platform. I think that's something I'd be happy to facilitate, in fact, if we wanted to take that forward in the next few weeks.
I can add, Wayne, that the European Parliament is absolutely a key partner. And what is interesting is that there is a whole range of social initiatives, social policy initiatives that have been launched by the von der Leyen Commission. And quite a number of them are highly controversial. There is, for instance, a directive now being proposed on minimum wage, highly controversial. There will probably be a directive coming on minimum income, probably even more controversial, where you see very quickly a split between the political right and the political left. My experience over the last 10, 15 years is that homelessness is a surprisingly consensual issue in the European Parliament, at least when it concerns, like, everybody agrees in the European, or virtually everybody agrees that it is an urgent issue and that it needs to be addressed as quickly as possible, and that the EU has a role to play there. And I think it's attractive for the European Commission to also take on these kind of issues, because it's easier to generate impact, positive impact. And in the last Commission, a lot of initiative failed in the social areas, and I don't think the European Commission can afford many more failures in the social area. And that's why I'm hopeful that homelessness is likely to stay there for the foreseeable years, and that we will continue to get strong support from the European Parliament. There might be divergence of views on how to tackle homelessness, but I think the fact that it needs to be tackled as a distinct issue, I think there the consensus is quite wide.
Could I just wish all of you who are directly involved in all of this process now and will be into the future, could I wish you well? I think the collaboration is really important. And just maybe maybe some ways representing people participating in this webinar, watching it, and from the outside, just to ask that, you know, there be a flow of information as to what's happening, and maybe an opportunity for citizens as well to feed into this and have our say. But again, you know, thank you for that, and I wish you well, and I'm very happy to have participated.
I think that's a nice place to sign up, and I think that is I mean, Freck commented on the fact that in Ireland homelessness is a significant issue, a significant political issue, and that is in large part, not entirely, but in large part because the citizens of Ireland and the people who live here decided that it should be, and have reflected that in the way that they vote and in the representations that they make to their public representatives. So I think that's a very useful contribution, because I think that as much as there seems to be a consensus in the European Parliament on this, that you can imagine that it is a representative body, and that around Europe people are offended by homelessness, and we should be doing more, and hopefully we'll do more. With that, I am going to run slightly over, so I'm going to thank my three speakers today. I found that really, really useful, and really welcome to see the level of enthusiasm that's there, and the level of work that's been happening both historically and ongoing. So just to thank everybody again, and to thank everybody who attended today for your questions and your interaction as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.